I think that if we can motivate people to want to be at work, to want to show up, it'll make them excited to be here. You won't have to turn over, and you'll be able to invest back in your employees.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey folks, we're back for another great show for Simply Trade podcast. Thank you so much again for all that you guys have been doing. You're flagging us, you're liking us, you're sharing us. It's like, oh my gosh, it's the show is expanding, so it's wonderful. With that, it has been we're school has started, football is starting. Thank goodness. I'm a big football fan. Baseball is kind of wrapping up as far as the majors go and all of that. So hopefully your team is still in the hunt for the playoffs and whatnot. But Lalo, I will say that Memphis is finally seeing some relief from the ridiculous triple digit or high 90 degree weather and all that. But I think you're still suffering, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. We still are. But aside from suffering, I want to talk about another kind of suffering. My Yankees, speaking of baseball, are not doing very well this year. But the silver lining is that the Red Sox are doing just as bad. So
Yeah, to all of our listeners that may be Red Sox fans and all that, sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I have some really good friends that are Sox fans, and I have always been a Yankee fan, and man, they give me grief and whatnot. We go back and forth, but that's probably one of the oldest rivalries in baseball ever.
Right. And for the first time ever, the Texas Rangers are doing good. So at least there's something here that's going on. So
there you go. Well, hey, listen, we have got a good show coming up today. This is going to be a little bit of a different take on from our logistics and compliance and supply chain and all that. It's still related, but we're going to get to talk about a little bit of some workforce development type activities. And I had mentioned in the past that I had been project managing part of a federal grant in the Mid-South area on workforce development, and what the objective is to develop some accelerated training, as we called it, 4 to 24 week type periods of training programs for individuals in the Mid-South to get them qualified and enhance them with knowledge and or skills so that they're qualified for some of the many open jobs in the area. And there's a large auto manufacturer that's coming into play. They're building a plant here. There's other existing factories and businesses that are looking for people, trying to get them in with the work ethic and the skills and knowledge. So it's been a struggle with a lot of this. Now, that said, I will tell you, our guest today is a fellow by the name of Nathan Pritikin, excuse me. I get that right. Pritikin. I'll tell you what, I'd screw up a 2-car parade right now. I'm like, I've been talking too much. Anyway, Nathan has been a great supporter of our logistics council that has been an advisory board to who I've been working with. So I will say with this is that Nathan is not only extremely knowledgeable in the IT realm, but also in regards to logistics, supply chain, workforce development, all kinds of things. So Lalo, before we bring him on, I don't know, this would be an area that, especially on the IT ranks, Nathan's probably going to be able to talk your language better than mine.
yeah, we'll see how this goes. But yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Nathan. Welcome to our show. And outside of the normal guests that we have, I mean, that are the ones that our typical, I shouldn't say normal, because our common or typical client, not client, guest is someone who's been in logistics for X number of years, and it's in trade or whatever, but it's really nice to have someone new and fresh in our show that sees a different, I guess, aspect of it, Andy, a different, just a different perspective of the way trade and logistics not evolves, but works. There's a bunch of cogs that come together, and this is one of them. So, thank you and welcome to our show.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you guys having me here, and I just kind of want to thank both of you again. This is a really awesome opportunity, and I really hope that this can go out and just kind of help the community and help people with workforce development struggles.
Why don't you tell Nathan? Why don't you tell folks where you're, who you're working for, and where you're located? Because you're outside the Memphis area, but not too far.
Yeah, we're about 30 minutes east of Memphis in Somerville, Tennessee. We are a contract manufacturer, Memphis Contract Packaging, and we manufacture consumer goods for different contracts.
Well, and one of the things, folks, Nathan has an IT background that I'm just elated. Again, he's been such a great advisor for me, as well as our team that we're on the workforce development. One of the things I want to emphasize here for our listeners is that you could be in any facet here regarding, it could be in an importer, exporter, you could be in the IT realm, you could be in supply chain, you could be a service provider, doesn't matter. Some of the things we're going to talk about is what is your contribution that you might be able to make for a workforce development effort in your local community. So this is not just a Mid-South effort, even though we're going to focus on talking about the Mid-South. There are workforce development efforts all across this country. So there's things that it really is only going to be successful if employers step up and do some things. And you can do a few things just that won't cost a whole lot of money, and yet could have a huge impact, not only in changing the lives of individuals, but also on supporting your local community. So Nathan, you and I have talked through some things on whatnot, but why don't you talk about some of the efforts and things that you have in mind as far as what you see the need as an employer as well as your community that's going on, and before we get into what you're actually suggesting people do.
Yeah, try to kind of touch back on what you were talking about. It really doesn't matter if you're, in logistics or transportation. I'm pretty sure almost every employer in the country can agree on the fact that right now we're seeing a huge employee shortage. Whether that's skilled labor or whether that's with a degree, a certificate, whatever what have you, there's a very large shortage. And really, one of the things that I was just kind of talking about with you previously is how do we fix that? Because ever since COVID, like I said, we can all agree the employee supply chain has not been the same, and I'm not really sure if it'll change. I think it's evolving and growing and changing, and as it grows and it evolves, we need to kind of rise to the occasion to meet those standards.
Well, there's been such a detrimental hit on work ethic as a whole. Now, again, we're not talking to everybody. We're talking just in general what employers are having to deal with. It's tough enough to find people to fill some of these positions, and then you go through the process of vetting somebody, get them hired, get them onboarded. And then, the work ethic there is where they're not showing up to work on time, or they're not really putting forth the effort, or things seem to be a little tough and they just, quit and leave. And that causes problems. And then the other is just finding enough people. So with that, I think there's a scenario here is, post COVID, there's some issues. I think on the same token, we just need to be more aggressive in getting some things done and being real with people on how life is. So saying that, what are you looking at as far as when you're saying it's trying to find qualified people? and we're trying to do something different. You and I have talked about reaching out to like the high school kids and trying to do some things in that nature. So, is there anything that you're looking at doing that you're doing now or proposing to do as far as an employer and with the local community there in Somerville?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly where I was going with this next. So as far as the not finding people, or the people that you do have aren't showing up, or you have high employee turnover rates, um, I think I was kind of brainstorming about it, and one of the solutions I was thinking about is, a while back, I had this dream where I wanted to be an astronaut, right? But I wasn't really there with my math. I wasn't really there with my science, but I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, how many people, because they don't have a really expensive piece of paper saying they have their master's or PhD, aren't able to contribute to, say, these higher classes of jobs because they don't have that education? And I started thinking about it. What if the talent is already here? What if the workforce is already here? You just have to figure out how to invest into those people and kind of help them grow and learn with the company. Um, because if you can start to invest and change these people's lives that already work for you, well, then that's going to make them excited to come to work. They're going to have the stresses of their lives. They're going to have the economy where inflation is rising. But as inflation rises, so should we. We should rise to the occasion to meet these things. And I think that if we can motivate people to want to be in work, to want to show up, it'll make them excited to be here. You won't have the turnover, and you'll be able to invest back into your employees. And to kind of go back into the high school thing, I think if we could reach our future employees at a much sooner age, to where they can be excited about what's happening around them. Like, it's not just hey, I've got to go to school, and then when I'm done with school, I've got to go to my job. It doesn't have to be like that. I mean, realistically, yes, you have to go to a job to pay your bills, but why shouldn't you enjoy it in the same time?
Well, and that's a vital point. We're introducing, some of these kids to look. Not everybody is prone to go to college, and not everybody is, apt to, all the different skills. And you got to find your niche, but you got to try things before you can find that niche. But let's back up a minute, because you've hit on really two different things here that I think is paramount. One, the first one is, as employers are looking for people to fill certain jobs, one of the things that so often employers do is they don't look at their own existing employees. There's a lot of frontline. There could be a receptionist. There could be some warehouse workers or something, and that are already employed. This would be a good opportunity for them to step into another role and get some additional training. Hey, that's where you need to go. And so that's one of the areas is like, well, they don't have the training. Well, you know what? I would rather take somebody that's already on board and start working with them. They already know your company. They're already onboarded. So it's just a matter of continuing to train them while they're doing what they're doing. And then second to that is then the local community. In this case, we were talking about, hey, how can you expose the like the juniors and seniors, or even middle school and high school, to different jobs and careers, and get them interested in that, and along with their parents, and some things of that nature. So, what are you thinking about that as far as how to tap some of that?
So, as far as that goes, to try to understand what that is, to tap that, I mean, one of the things that brought me onto this idea is, recently I was working out on the shop floor, and there was this guy, I think he 18 years old, and he was one of our palletizers. He was taking our finished good products, stacking them on a pallet so they could go back into the receiving shop and get sent out the door. And he came up to me and he was like, hey, today's my last day. And I said, where are you going? And he said, college. I got accepted into the IT program at the University of Memphis. And I had no idea that this kid had this drive or this motivation to do it, because he was over here stacking boxes. And that's really what got me engaged in this and thinking, why shouldn't we begin our own internal training program? To answer your question, this training program that we could start to provide would get people certified on a level that's within our company, whether that be with IT, robotics, management skills, uh, to try to understand what do we have to invest in these people that we have to bring them to a higher level. They're cruising at like an altitude of like 5,000 feet, but let's bring them up to 30. And what do we need to do to get them there?
All right, let's stop for just a second. One of the things as far as actions, folks, if you're looking at it, and again, everybody's struggling to try and fill some of these open positions. And as you're going through, the example that Nathan just mentioned is here's a frontline employee doing what might be considered somewhat menial job or a low-level job. Okay, fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's a stepping stone to something else. But it's a shame that the management didn't really realize what's going on. One of the things that I am a strong proponent of, and matter of fact, it comes up if you're in management, there's an organization called Manager Tools or managertools.com actually. And there's no affiliation here. So but it's one that I've used, and they're a big proponent on using one-on-one meetings, weekly one-on-ones with the employees. And they should be 30-minute meetings. And the first 10 minutes are anything that the employee has to discuss with you as a manager. The next 10 minutes, anything that you have for them. But then the last 10 minutes should be on what are their career goals and some of the things to talk about that and what are they interested in. So with that, of what Nathan's talking about, an action item is take a look, whether it's a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly one-on-one. As a management, you need to be looking to see what are some of the career aspirations of your employees, and that way it can be, then management can share that with others in the company for the opportunities. So with that coming back around is in looking at it, developing that training for your own staff. In this case, you're talking about along the lines of IT. I will say that I discovered, I'm thinking, of being a programmer or whatever else, there's a lot of aspects to IT. So there's the software programming, which is one piece. There's networking or network operations type things, the hardware of literally the wireless and the corded networks and how to deal with that. There's the cybersecurity aspect of it. There is what's called PLC, program logic control, which is your monitoring belts and systems and hydraulics and everything, and all that comes into play and all of that. And then there's something else is called mechatronics, and all these terms I'm throwing at you folks, you can look those things up at some point. But the point being, from an IT perspective, there's so many aspects that you got to start somewhere. If you have an aspiration for any of that kind of stuff, then there's other aspects of, a CDL driver or a supply chain analyst and data analytics and all that kind of stuff. So Nathan, let's come back around though then. So what are you looking at in your development of trying to tap your own employees and come up with something?
So one of the things that I proposed that we do as a company is to try to invest back into our people to get them excited about their jobs, to get it people wanting, like breaking down the maintenance manager's door saying, hey, I want to be on your team now. What do we do to get them to do that? And one of the things that I came up with was kind of formulating this curriculum of individual steps that you have to take, whether it be hands-on training, or if I'm teaching them like in a classroom setting or just having them take a quick test. Number one, our big deal is safety. Like we want to make sure that every step of this way they're going through safety, they're getting their lockout tagout procedures correct, all of that good stuff. But we started kind of creating this training program where they have a book that I developed where it's got pictures on it. It's got step-by-step guide, step A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 on how to change a tape roll on a machine. So it puts tape on a box. And going through all these tasks, once they have, the main technician that's working on that line sign off on all these things, they're now certified as an entry level technician, kind of working and shadowing with that master technician. And we found, yeah, absolutely. And I created these really amazing certificates that have their name on them, that almost look like a diploma, that have our company logo on them. And the amount of joy that people get just from being handed that, of showing an acknowledgement of, we see you, we see the work that you've done, and we appreciate it. Here's your new position, and this is your certificate that you can take anywhere. And if people have questions about that certificate, they can call back into our office and say, how did they get certified?
That's fantastic. All right. So, in developing that training, have you worked with your HR department so that they can recognize that as a credential for qualification for a job?
Absolutely. We work very closely with our HR team and with our safety manager to ensure, we're training these guys, they're knowing what they're doing, but are we being safe doing it? And when we qualify them and certify them, are you okay with us qualifying and certifying them from a safety point, from an HR point, and we come together?
It's interesting that you say that, Nathan, because here we're at Global Training Center. We do the same thing. Obviously, we train people, companies on international trade. And it's funny that I usually see the certificate as something like, well, you just earned it, but it's funny how when it does not appear on our customers profile, or they didn't get that email that we promised them that they were going to get because it got lost in spam or whatever. They call us, they tell us, hey, I want that certificate. It's like, I need to give it to HR. It's really, and we started something different too. And this is really cool, is that we're doing digital badges that are verified. That they're encrypted and they're verified on our server, so nobody can. Well, I guess anything is hackable, but technically they're not hackable in the sense that these are cool because they share them on LinkedIn, and you click on it and it gives them a whole list as to exactly what they learned and what they did. But you're right. I mean, it's funny, not funny. It's interesting to see how much value that brings, and how much pride it brings in for somebody who's learning this, and 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 we recognize that. And yeah, you're right. It's something that you should reward your employees with.
Yeah, absolutely. An example that I can give you really quickly is, we had an employee come in that was working fast food. And I heard him out talking on the line, and he was talking about how quickly he could send somebody out the door through the drive-through. And I went to our management team and I said, can we put this guy in this program? Can we try to bring him up to this, level of expertise? Because he's got the heart, he's got the mind. He doesn't have any college, he doesn't have any training or any certificates, but he's got the heart and mind to do these things. And I think it'll be very valuable to us and to himself and the community if we do this. So they gave me the green light, and we started training this guy. Long story short, he's now in charge of maintenance operations on second shift. And daily he walks up to us and thanks us. And that's what I call a lifetime employee. Like, that guy is going to want to come back here. He's going to talk great about the company. He's going to be like our own PR representative. And it's great. I like changing people's lives.
Well, and that's again, that becomes that valuable penny that you start off with, that mushrooms up into other things, but and becomes even more valuable. But that's one where people look for. And for our listeners, keep in mind, this is one thing, we're talking to the employers, but I want to talk to, you as an individual. You may or may not be in management. Okay, fine. But if you're trying to start your career, or even listening to us, and it's like, well, listen to what these people are saying, it's like, all right, employers like to have those that have initiative. So in other words, be that horse you got to pull up on rather than kick in the backside. It's like, have initiative, get out there. Don't be afraid to fail. For my goodness, anything worthwhile, worth working for, worth achieving, is worth failing at until over and over again, until you acquire the skill and master the skill. And so, with that, I will say that that's one that I'm sure is such a great morale booster to other employees out there when they see somebody succeed in that realm. So, kudos to you and what you're doing there. Let's talk a little bit, though, about the next generation, the next group of young people coming up through the ranks and whatever. What about reaching out to those that are in the school or in the communities and things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I'm trying to bring to the attention of my workforce and just kind of workforce in the South in general is what can we do as a company to kind of bridge that gap between today and the future? And that's the clear, straight, easy answer is high schools. If we can make it to a high school and just kind of show these guys like the cool gadgets, like what are kids into today? Video games, VR, all of that good stuff. Well, robotics is very similar. IT is very similar. There's some aspects in IT where you would benefit from having a VR headset where you can work on something remotely. Um, and if we can kind of show them, hey, this is what manufacturing looks like. Well, now it doesn't just sound like, oh, I'm working in a coal mine at this industrial plant. No, it's not that. We've progressed quite far in the industry, and we can help motivate these kids with a similar training program to want to start a life in manufacturing.
Well, and with that, let's stop for a second. Is that there's a lot more in manufacturing. There's a lot of use of automation, and more specifically, you mentioned the robots or robotics. Is one of the things that yes, the robotics will handle a lot of the manual labor type scenarios, but there's got to be a technician that can maintain that or set it up. So there are robotics technician courses. That's one of the things we were looking at in getting somebody trained on how to literally install a unit or become a protege to somebody on how to install a unit, a robotics unit, or maintain it and be that first line of defense. All right, the unit is not working, so they come out and go through the preliminary of diagnostics and say, oh, it's something they can fix themselves, or no, this is going to require a more experienced technician. So, folks, as we're looking at this, I'm telling you, is that there's some really cool things that are going on out there, and we've been focused predominantly on IT just because of Nathan's background, but this goes across so many different industry types and skill types and job families and all that. But so in looking at that, what you're talking about, reaching out to the high school, what is it that you have is like kind of the vision you have in what your company and others may be able to do in supporting what's going on at the high schools?
So one of the biggest, my vision of what I would like to see my company doing, and not just my company doing, I want to see like our country leading in this effort, is one of our biggest obstacles with high schools is you have a bunch of kids that are, they're under 18, where they need some sort of level of supervision or something to make sure that, they're staying safe, they're not wandering off, skipping class or doing something. So one of the things, kind of ideas that I had from working with the logistics council is kind of having like this mobile like training center, kind of like a mobile library, where you have these little hands-on workstations that are no bigger than a laptop computer or slightly larger that you could set up in this mobile unit that could pull up at the high school. And we could have a quick lab there where we show people how to complete a very basic circuit that doesn't have or require any high voltage or anything like that, to spark the interest, to get them interested. And, once they start showing that interest, we have them fill something out or whatever. And if we have enough people, then we can set up a mobile lab there where we're constantly maintaining a back and forth communication with that school.
Well, one of the things along that lines, I will say that in Jackson, Tennessee, I had the privilege of getting to see the Stanley Black and Decker plant that's there, and they're actually implementing or have implemented a program where there are high school students that literally will complete some of their schoolwork on site at the plant. They've got teachers there, they're going through some things. And then part of their day is they're actually working part time in the factory, but they're learning and they're being trained on like CNC machines and on how to be a CNC operator, or how to be a robotics technician, or how to do some of these other things we're talking about that's sparking interest. And in some of these cases, there's a lot of people. Matter of fact, I got to talk to a couple of the students that said, this has been a great program for them. They've been involved since they were a junior, and they're now a senior, and they'll be graduating and whatnot later on. But the point being is that they said, I knew I wasn't going to be going to college, but they said I just had no idea what to do from a career perspective, and they were looking at working in a fast food joint or whatever, and all those are fine. But it's like this actually gave them an opportunity to actually have a career on the line in the manufacturing, and making a lot more money than they would have in fast food. Here's the point, is that then there was this sense of pride that this individual said, I never was very good at math, but I have now learned on how to, that he had to learn, again, go back over the mathematics and the processes and all that, but he actually applied it to his job. So he said it gave him an immediate impact. So the point being, a lot of times we're training people on and giving them knowledge, but they don't know how to take that knowledge then and apply it on where it's going to stick in their job. So that's one of the things, I guess, is just like mathematics is a big deal. You mentioned being an astronaut or something at some point. I got to tell you, man, I had trouble adding 2 and 2 together. And what I have discovered is mathematics is no different than being an athlete. Is if you're going to go to in basketball and learn to shoot a free throw and have a high shooting percentage of success, it takes practice. Well, same thing with mathematics. You've got to work on it, practice it over and over, and all of a sudden you finally get it. So what do you think about that as far as those kinds of scenarios? Is that what Black & Decker's doing with those kids and whatnot? Is that something that you're trying to replicate there in Somerville?
Absolutely. That would be amazing. Because we have Fayette County's high school just up the road from us. And if we could partner with that and have something along those lines where kids are graduating high school with 1 or 2 years of job experience already, being certified and a guaranteed job already, that I don't think that would just impact Somerville. I think that would change our country if we could get behind that together.
Folks, stop and think what Nathan just said. Working with those kids, and they have 1 to 2 years of hands-on job experience with developing great skills in that scenario. Think of what the impact is, not only to that individual and even their family, but also to the company and the community and the things of that nature. It's like, oh my gosh, Nathan, you're right. That would be a phenomenal thing. So what is it that employers, what would you recommend that they be looking at and doing to get involved to make this kind of a concept of a dream reality?
To be honest with you, I thought it was going to be more complicated than it is. You would think, oh man, I'm going to have to make, thousands of phone calls, spend hours and hours looking. But if you make the right call to the right people, it won't take you long before you have a grant in your hand where they're saying, we will help you out if you hire X amount of people, or vice versa. If you reach out to, your local chamber of commerce or your local workforce solutions area, I guarantee you the county that you are in has some level of workforce solutions. And if you reach out to that local office and ask them the very simple question, how can I give back to my community and how can we receive help in the meantime? They're going to have 10,000 answers for you. You'll have your pick of which one you get to choose.
Well, one of the things also that would come into play, and I imagine there are a lot of listeners right now that are immediately looking at it, and I can tell you I've literally addressed this, and that's insurance purposes and risk and all that. And if you have a minor now working in your office or your factory and all those kinds of things, what about the insurance scenario? There are, with the state of Tennessee, I know this, and then with many other states around the country, there are, with the Department of Labor, not only at the state level, but also at the federal level, there are exemptions and allowances for kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old that would prevent the company to being at risk. In other words, their insurance would be covered by it. That's one thing. The second thing, though, is in there are apprenticeship programs that come into play. And if you are interested in developing some of this and signing up to become a host for apprenticeship programs, that's another thing that opens up potentially funding, but also support from the Department of Labor and the communities. I'm telling you, that is just phenomenal things. So with that, I will say, folks, man, this is some things that you can get into that would help. Now, here's something else. These training programs is another element. So, Nathan, I want to you touched on something I thought was really good before when we were talking about it. It's like, okay, let's just say that you do have a training program of some kind of subject. Is being able to supply employees that are experts in your company that could teach those courses. And so now the company's paying for that employee to teach it, but that would be something from an accounting perspective that their time and effort would be able to be considered a charitable contribution. So from a, if you will, writing off that expense is one thing. Gives you the ability to be a supporter of the community, as well as then again reaching out to some of these individuals, these young kids and boys and girls, and helping them. What do you think about that? Why don't you comment on what I just mentioned there?
Absolutely. That's kind of exactly what happened with me. I started at this company, just working a regular maintenance job as a maintenance technician. And the management team noticed my efforts and noticed what I was doing to continuously not just perform maintenance actions and keep the lines running, but they noticed that I was trying to figure out how to get just one more. My mentality has always been just get one more bottle. What do we have to do to get one more unit? So they said, can you teach that? Can you replicate that? And, they joked around and they said, can you clone yourself? And I said, absolutely. And they came back to me and said, well, how would you do that? And I said, well, by teaching, of course. The answer is by teaching people. So to go back to your question of bringing up these employees that are experts in their job field to kind of clone themselves, to create more employees like themselves, to further the education and knowledge of the company. I think too often the issue occurs where people think to themselves, well, if only I know this, then that's job security, or whatever the reasonings
so
are.
Short-sighted, yes, if you take that mentality.
Absolutely. And I want to combat that. I want to say, well, if you're the guy sharing all the knowledge and everybody's coming to you saying, what can we do to be better? Can you show us how to do these things? That's going to be noticed. And as a company, we can look at the people that are doing that and bring those people into a level of teaching and expertise.
Well, and as leadership, when you see employees that are showing that kind of initiative or showing that kind of behavior, you want to reward that. And that's something that you want to come alongside. This, one of the other things is, I give it an analogy where, there are people that, have you ever been out walking on railroad tracks, and as you're going down, you got the gravel, you got the different rails, you're trying to walk on a rail and you're stumbling along and you lose your balance, or you try and go as quickly as you can, but then you can only go so far. And when everybody's doing that, it's a little tough. But one thing is, if you have one person on the left rail and another person on the right rail, and then they reach out and extend their arms to each other and hold on. Now all of a sudden you've got some stability there, and man, those two can run down those rails quickly without falling off because of what? There, it's a teamwork effort. Hence, the scenario here is being able to take employees to come alongside other individuals and help bolster them and work with them. Man, you've got a team that works, and that's what's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've got, your A team of people where, say you have a scenario where your line is down, or you have, an assembly line that's struggling to maintain its numbers or keep up with production goals. You can then make a phone call to your A team and say, hey, can we take a quick break? I want you guys to go out on the field and check out what we got going on. Now all of a sudden your production is going back up again. So it's a very sustainable thing that will give back to you in the future.
I love it. I love it. Well, Nathan, I would say that in looking at this with the workforce development efforts and what we've got underway, is there anything that you could recap? I mean, thus far, what I'm hearing is one, look at employees that are currently, people that are currently employed, I guess, to see if anybody has interest in some of the open positions you have. And we've talked a lot about IT, but it could be anything. And two, reaching out to seeing if you can have an impact with the high school kids and the kids in your area. I mean, we haven't even talked about maybe others that are unemployed in the community and how to reach out to them. So that's just another scenario where maybe there are people that there was a big effort at one point for to help have classes after hours to help people learn to read, because there was a lot of that. Well, now you have scenarios like maybe to offer some after hours classes on how to, maybe help somebody make a career change. Somebody's gotten laid off. Okay. Just because they've been laid off doesn't mean that, the world stops, and let's see what we can do to help them. So as you just mentioned, if you have a passion and a heart to have an impact in your local community, it's not as difficult as you may think. There's a lot of programs out there that you can align with.
Yeah, absolutely. To touch base on your 1, 2, 3 that we got, of hiring our internal employees that already have the talent that are already existing. 2 being reaching out to the high schools to figure out what your future is going to look like as a company. But to go on to people that are unemployed in your community, that are seeking jobs. If anyone's listening to this that is currently seeking a job or looking for that, go to your workforce solutions that's in your county. They will set up job centers and job hiring events where they are able to bring together the local community of employers. And you'll be able to walk around kind of like at Comic-Con and walk up to each table. Like, here in Memphis, we have Ford, we have FedEx, Memphis Contract Packaging. We've got all these places coming up where you can walk over to their table, talk to the HR recruiter sitting at the table, and they'll give you a business card. So that's one of the things that I've been looking at getting into with the workforce in the South to help reach our unemployment side, is going to these job fairs and saying, how can we help?
Well, and that's the scenario where I know that I've had the privilege of talking to some other folks in workforce development efforts around the country, up in Alaska, down in Nevada, and in Colorado, and just all over this country, down in Florida as well. And again, it's just, the niche is there are folks that need a little extra help. It's not, a handout, it's a hand up in trying to give them the skills and knowledge so that they're employable and they can continue on with their training and whatnot. So, and some of these things, even with what we're talking about, doesn't deter them from being able to get a degree if they want to go on to, for a college degree. It gives them the opportunity to be employed, and then that in turn, where a lot of times the employer has a tuition reimbursement or whatever. But the other is just the skills and going into the trades. So, Nathan, man, I tell you what, I think you are phenomenal, and I appreciate your support of the Logistics Council, but I also support and appreciate your support of your local community there. And your company ought to be very proud of somebody like yourself and what your efforts are, but also the support that the Memphis Packaging has got. That they, oh my gosh, they have been a good company too, and they've listened to you. So that has been fantastic. Kudos to them.
Absolutely. I really appreciate this place. It feels like something that I'm going to do probably for the rest of my life, and I look forward to seeing what happens with it.
Well, with that, we need to wrap up our show. Folks, again, look at your workforce development. What are you doing to create a legacy if you were to retire or move on? Have you got things in place for the next generation coming up through there? What about your own employees? Digging deeper into your own employment staff to see what you can do to get them on the pathway to improving their skills and moving up through the company and all that, as well as your local community. I hope you will consider that for now and in the near time future, as well as reaching out to the school systems. Lalo, I think this has been a good show, and I really appreciate it, my friend, but I think we're going to have to let this one go. But Nathan, thank you for joining us and being on our show.
Absolutely. I appreciate the both of you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.